Are you sitting comfortably? This is a short autobiographical story called Doctor Who, My Dad and the Birth of the Universe. Doctor Who got drunk at my christening, very drunk according to my dad. I like to think it was because he had some inkling of the problems he would encounter and the responsibilities he would have to bear as a future Time Lord. For to be honest, he was still in mortal form and was yet to become one of Doctor Who's alter egos. The actor Jon Pertwee, who was to be the third Doctor Who in the early 70s, was stationed at the Navy shore station HMS Valkyrie on the Isle of Man, as was my dad. The drunken celebrations in 1942, which accompanied my being the first child born to any of the serving crew, was probably more Navy lark or Wurzel Gummidge than intergalactic warfare. The shore station was an experimental radar base and my dad a wireless and communications chief petty officer and instructor. The story of Jon Pertwee's celebration was one of the very few things he told me about his wartime experiences. Such a filial intimacy was rare, for father-son bonding by the sharing of human failings or by the mutual celebration of success was not fashionable when I was young. It was not that my dad was shy. He had a good voice and had been a ship's broadcaster. Occasionally, too, he would strive to be the life and soul of the party, with an enthusiasm not always shared by my mother, who tenaciously liked to be the centre of attraction. At one of our many popular children's parties, organised with military precision by my mother, my dad suddenly appeared, lipsticked and dressed in high heels, black skirt, bodice and a bonnet. "Guess who I am, kids? Guess who I am?" My mother was incensed at this challenge to her position, responding to this intrusive charade of old Mother Riley with a seething anger. While smiling at the children, she slowly reached out over the array of trifles topped with hundreds and thousands, the overloaded piles of tomato sandwiches and the paper-dollied, snow-dusted raspberry jam sponge cake, until her hand searched out a stack of side plates, which she then lifted one by one and, swearing under her breath, systematically threw them towards my dad. Defeated, he left the room to a lingering atmosphere of both horror and amusement at what was perceived by the assembled children as some kind of Punch and Judy performance, as my mother calmly resumed serving the sausage rolls. My dad was a complex person, very intelligent and perhaps more sensitive than he cared to display. After being demobbed from the Navy, he became agitated and easily frustrated with the routines of a domestic life. He had, for example, an almost phobic regard for the risk of fire. He became angry if fires were left unattended or when our holiday visitors left cigarette stubs still alight in ashtrays. Such an obsessive concern was ammunition for my mother's taunts. However, it was long after my parents had died that I learned that such obsessive fears about fire were an outcome of a wartime incident when my dad witnessed the death of a best friend engulfed in flames. Despite these occasionally scraps of information, his wartime experiences remain largely unknown to me. Although I have an old tin box of fading documents and musty-smelling certificates, I know little of his life at sea and his experience of it. Among the documents is a garish piece of paper entitled South China Navigation Certificate that proclaims that having sailed the 7 seas and succeeded in a list of naval prankish achievements, he has safely reached his goal, the Red Lion Inn, Kowloon, South China, where he is now expected to RIP. Signed 28th of July 1939 by the chief pilot. Also in the tin box, a yellowing Christmas and New Year card of 1927 features a fading photograph of HMS Cockchafer on the Yangtze River. I would imagine how he obtained them from his travels, but while many stories could have been told, I heard none. To be fair, for many years he suffered from deafness, and a clumsy and humming deaf aid was not conducive to close conversations. There was, however, one act of special communication between us. When he had left the Navy, my parents stayed for almost another 20 years on the Isle of Man, where I was born and brought up. He worked as an electrical repair engineer, servicing and fixing radios and early television sets. Consequently, during the 50s, we were one of the earliest families on the island to have a television. Two of my strongest childhood memories are of the black and white and mostly grey images of the televised Queen's coronation in 1953, when neighbours packed into our back living room. The same room earlier in the year had been equally packed with school friends, somewhat rowdier and more agitated, as we watched the famous Stanley Matthews Cup final between Blackpool and Bolton Wanderers. TV sets were common in our house, as he would bring them home from work to fix and test. He would stoop, white-coated, into the backs of the sets with cigarette in mouth, glasses at the end of his nose, and a smouldering soldering iron in one hand, adjusting his deaf aid with the other. Often I would be summoned to hold a mirror in front of the screen so that from the back of the set he could see and tune the picture as he fiddled and poked with a surgeon's concentration among the innards of the television set. Often the screen would be a mass of flickering white blobs and spots with greenish tinted shadows quivering in various states of unfocused form. The white flickering interference, or snow, was itself a compelling fascination for me, with its buzzing abstract patterns that fed my imagination. I would occasionally look around the set to my dad, who, head down deep into the depths of the TV, was magically manipulating the changing array of buzzing and crackling patterns until wondrously he brought forth form and meaning in both light and sound. It seemed like we were both engaged in some kind of electrical alchemy. Not many years ago, a friend of mine told me that the interfering snow and its white noise were manifestations of energy from the Big Bang and the beginnings of the universe, which still filled the ether and outer space. If only we had known that my dad was communicating to me the birth of the universe. What a conversation! Undoubtedly, Doctor Who would have been impressed. Thank you. The end.